Hi, my name is John Teeters, and this is my Module 14 presentation on a case study, Internet Use Violation Threats over the World Wide Web. So the first thing to do is to identify what's known, and so I have a few things that I knew after reading the scenario. First, we're dealing with a situation at Slattery Steno High School and the students there. It's a very well-known high school in its state. It comes from an affluent part of town. The students are very tech-savvy and capable, and it's a very highly regarded high school. The man in charge is one Dr. Harvey Smith. He won the Teacher of the Year award for his state previously, and he has a very high reputation, and the school has a very high reputation as well, and he likes to maintain that reputation. And he's the person who needs to resolve this issue. The person who's being harassed in this case is the teacher, Miss Robin Tate, who's been teaching there for a year and a half. She teaches with a style that is highly rigorous, with high expectations. Not all students get A's, and that causes some problems in the community. Students and parents both have complained about her techniques, and she's only been there a year and a half, and so she's still kind of on a test mode as a new teacher. The incident is over the weekend, Miss Tate received an email while she was at home, and the email directed her to a website, a Facebook page that contained derogatory remarks about her teaching style and her expectations, and the Facebook page closed with a question: would you like to see Ms. Tate disappear? And so it's kind of an implied threat. After receiving the email and reading it on Sunday afternoon, she called Dr. Smith and had a conversation with him about what to do. So here's what needs to be known in this situation. First thing is, what's the source of the threat? That really needs to be identified. Was it somebody in the community, the school community, such as a student, a teacher, or another staff member? Was it somebody outside of the community? We don't know anything about the source of the threat. It's assumed in the conversation that it was a student, but that hasn't been proven yet. Another thing is, has anyone else in the community received a similar threat? It's kind of a curious thing. So if this is going on in the community, or if this is just a single random attack, it might be nice to know if this is a common thing that takes place within the community. And what email address was the threat sent to? Was it sent to Ms. Tate's home address or school address? That's something I'd like to know. It kind of categorizes where the threat might have come from. If it's a school address, well, all the students and parents have access to that email address. If it wasn't a school address, then it's unlikely that it was a student or parent that caused the threat to be put out there. The other thing I'm kind of curious is, can the email and Facebook pages be tracked? From personal experience, I've seen this take place a couple of times where emails have been tracked back to students, actually 3 times. One was a bomb threat that a student had sent from a community library, and it was tracked back to a computer in the library. Also, a student at our school this year was bullying another student on campus, and the email that they sent was tracked back, and the student was caught doing that. And so my question is, can email and Facebook pages be tracked? So the problem really boils down to a couple of things. Teachers received a threat, and in my mind, if I was Dr. Smith, I'd have 3 goals in handling the situation. How can the teacher be supported? I think that teachers work best in situations where they feel confident and secure in their position. And so I would first and foremost be concerned about making sure that the teacher feels well supported in the situation. Second is, how can the perpetrator be found? Either through the tech department, either through student rumors or things like that. Is there a way to find the person who sent this email? And finally, how can this all become a teachable moment for a new staff member as well as students on campus? So I'm going to take the position of Dr. Harvey Smith, and I'm going to respond to the proposed plan of action and strategies as if I were him. So shortly after hanging up the phone, he reconsidered his problem, and he decided that rather than calling all the usual suspects in for questioning, the first call he'd make is to his tech department to see if this could be tracked down. He would like to see the evidence be more concrete rather than just a teacher being suspicious that a student who doesn't like her and she hasn't been able to prove has been making comments about her has sent the email. He would rather base this on more information. So he calls his tech department to get them started on solving and tracking down the source if that's possible. The second thing that Dr. Smith does is he emails Ms. Tate, and he lets her know of his new way of handling this, that he's going to go through the tech department first, and he's not going to have a conversation with her and the usual suspects in the morning, but he'll stop by her room tomorrow just to make sure that she's settling in well. The second thing is that after relaying these things to her, he realizes that maybe he was a little bit diminutive in saying that this is only a prank, and so he apologizes and says that he is taking this threat seriously. So the third thing, I guess, that I would do if I was him is email all the staff and just say that this has taken place, give a brief outline of it, and ask questions about whether staff have heard anything on this and whether they have received anything similar, because there's lots of ears out there that he can work from and use that for his benefit. Also, the other thing, once Monday morning started, I would just check on the student chatter. There's always teachers who have, and staff who have great rapport with students, and students generally talk about what they're up to. And so I would just start listening in and honing in on the chatter that's going on around campus between students and teachers to see if there's anything that could be contributed towards the situation. Until I had more evidence that it was a particular person, I would be stuck. I would not proceed without more evidence than just the incident itself. The other thing that I would initiate is a review of processes and policies that we have in place on educating students about digital literacy and the consequences of violating the protocols that are outlined in that. I think that's a really important process that needs to take place whenever something happens where a teacher or anyone else on campus is bullied or receives any kind of threat. So resolving issues while promoting success for students. And, my question is, how can the teacher be best supported while doing what is best for the student community? So when I look at this, I guess the big thing is to avoid temptation. Avoid the temptation of just rounding up the usual suspects and running forward without evidence. That's our first mode of operandi, and I think it's really important to be a data-driven decision-making process, and there just needs to be more data. The other thing is rely on the community. One of the things that happens is when the community comes together with a problem and relying on the community actually becomes stronger. And the moment that you start just pulling students in because you're suspicious of them, you immediately set up an us versus them situation. And so instead of dividing the community by accusing part of it, start relying on the community and listening to the chatter to isolate what's going on and to identify where the problem's coming from. The other thing is to promote trust. I think it's really essential. We just need to act in trust towards students and not assume that something is their fault. So, for example, this threat could have come from a parent. It could have come from a former boyfriend. It could have come from any number of sources other than the students. Certainly the students need to be considered, but I think by starting with a position of suspicion, you undermine trust instead of promoting trust. The other thing is in being straightforward with the staff and not undermining trust with the students, you're modeling respect for one another in a way that it gets replicated across the school community, and it's a really important aspect. So debriefing and reflecting on what background I bring to this process. So it's been an interesting year because we actually had a situation in our school that this year with students misbehaving, actually rumored to be misbehaving on campus with drugs and things like that. And I really didn't appreciate how we handled this as a staff. I think in a lot of ways we assumed the rumors were all true and responded from that motivation rather than trusting students who generally are pretty reliable. And another thing that we did that I think that was not a positive thing is that we talked to students in a way that gave them guilt by association. Certainly there may have been some drug issues going on campus, but it was more than likely a very small portion of the community. And with a small portion of the community, we tended to draw back. And for the sake of being fair to everyone was accused or actually questioned in ways. And it really promoted this idea that we didn't trust anyone, and even the good students. And so the good students were in the same boat, and I just don't like that guilt by association that takes place when we start doing things that way. So I kind of bring that perspective after a fresh thing in the way I approach this, the idea of trying to promote trust and student growth and student confidence through the process. So what is unresolved in the issue? Well, I think what for me remains unresolved is the balance between trusting students at their word and the heart of disciplining a problem through honest dialogue. I think it's kind of interesting. There's times when we need to trust students, but then there's times we need to hold them accountable and push them a little bit harder and hold them accountable for their actions and things like that. And it's really a tough balance to trust them, but also to push them when you have strong suspicion that they've been up to something that they shouldn't have been. A bit of it comes from trusting your instincts, and I understand that, but not trusting them too much when you don't have evidence to support them is the other flip side of that. Professional ethics and evidence of fairness. Promoting fairness and ethical behavior is based on actions, on evidence. You know, the big thing is finding the digital trail. And so when we base our actions on the evidence that we have something that's substantial, and we're promoting fairness and ethical behavior with the students. The moment that we haul a student in and question them based on our suspicions with the idea that they're already guilty, we're not promoting any idea of fairness or ethical behavior in the eyes of the students. The students, when they see that happen, the first thing they'll question is the unfairness of the situation. Why am I being singled out? And they'll also question, what are you basing the accusation on? So I think that the big deal for me in looking at these is basing the evidence on the digital trail. The second thing is promoting student growth. When we review the digital citizenship and the policies that are in place, and we make sure that we've been following them and how we can do them better and that students are following them, we're actually promoting students to be prepared for the digital future.